Washington stresses its defense commitment to Seoul following a warning that Russia will provide arms to North Korea if South Korea sends lethal assistance to Ukraine. Amid slumping exports, the government is set to ramp up its consultations in support for exporters aimed at removing unnecessary hurdles to the export process. And celebrating National Science Day, South Korea's biggest IT show is underway, showcasing what the country has to offer in this promising future sector. Good afternoon. We start with the U.S. response to Russia's recent warning against South Korea. Washington has stressed its defense commitment to Seoul as Russia threatens to send arms to North Korea if the South sends lethal aid to Ukraine. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
Following Moscow's threat to arm North Korea if South Korea sends lethal assistance to Ukraine, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby said Thursday that Washington takes its defense commitment to Seoul very, very seriously, stressing the treaty alliance between the two allies. Kirby also said that the U.S. is grateful for the support that South Korea has already provided for Ukraine, noting that Seoul has provided some $100 million worth of humanitarian aid assistance to Kyiv. He added that South Korea has also been very vocal in supporting Ukraine and speaking out against Russia's aggression. Kirby went on to call South Korea a terrific ally, terrific friend. During the press briefing, he also mentioned the upcoming state visit by President Yoon, in which Kirby said the two leaders will most likely discuss a wide range of issues, including the war in Ukraine. President Yoon, during an exclusive interview with Reuters earlier this week, hinted that Seoul could possibly shift its policy of no lethal weapons assistance to Ukraine. According to Yoon, South Korea may have no option but to provide more than humanitarian assistance to Ukraine if Russia conducts large-scale attacks on civilians. In response, Moscow threatened to supply Pyongyang with weapons and also warned that providing military aid to Ukraine would mean Seoul becoming involved in the conflict to a certain extent. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, after China slammed President Yoon's remarks on Taiwan from their recent interview, claiming Yoon is meddling in its domestic affairs, Seoul's foreign ministry immediately hit back, lodging strong complaints to the Chinese ambassador to South Korea. Our Lee Si-hoo has the latest.
South Korea's foreign ministry says it summoned the Chinese ambassador on Thursday to strongly protest Beijing's criticism of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's remarks on Taiwan. That's according to First Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Chang Woo-jin speaking to reporters on the same day. Chang said that China's foreign ministry was guilty of serious diplomatic discourtesy by denouncing Yoon and calling on South Korea to refrain from meddling in Taiwan issues. This move comes as President Yoon, in an interview with Reuters on Wednesday, said tensions in Taiwan occurred due to forceful attempts to change the status quo and voiced opposition to such change. Yoon also stressed that the issue is a global matter that goes beyond China and Taiwan, like the issue of North Korea. Regarding the comment, Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin on Thursday said that, quote, the resolution is a matter for Chinese who do not need to be told what should or should not be done, emphasizing that South Korea should not meddle in the matter. Hours after Beijing's comments, South Korea's foreign ministry hit back, saying the comments by the Chinese foreign ministry were unspeakable. Seoul's foreign ministry's Chang Woo-jin said that China should work to prevent unnecessary disturbance in the bilateral relationship between the two countries over the matter. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
South Korea has expressed deep regret over offerings and tributes from the Japanese Prime Minister and politicians to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine. A spokesperson from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said, quote, responsible leaders of Japan have once again sent offerings to and paid respects at the shrine and urged Japan to squarely face history and demonstrate humble reflection and sincere remorse for its past history. Kyodo News said Friday that Prime Minister Fumio Kishida sent a ritual offering to mark a two-day spring festival at the site. Around 90 lawmakers paid their respects at the shrine in person. Past offerings and visits by leaders have sparked strong criticism from South Korea and China, as the shrine is seen as a symbol of Japan's military aggression during World War II. It honors the country's war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals. In just a few days, President Yoon will embark on a state visit to the U.S. The president will be staying there for 5 full days with a sit-down with President Joe Biden and a speech at the U.S. Congress among the plans. Our Kim Do-yeon has what's in store for Yoon's trip.
President Yoon jets off to Washington, D.C. next Monday for a state visit hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden. This is the first state visit by a sitting South Korean president in 12 years, and according to the first deputy director of the National Security Office on Thursday, the two presidents are set to meet on multiple occasions.
President Yoon and President Biden will spend a long time together through multiple events, including the White House's official welcoming ceremony, the summit, and state dinner, and will congratulate each other for the success of the bilateral alliance of 70 years and exchange views of its future advancement.
Yoon's schedule so far shows that the summit will not be the first time the two meet, as Biden has invited Yoon for a reception on Tuesday evening, the day before Wednesday's summit. On Thursday, Yoon will address Congress on liberal democracy and share his blueprint for the future of the bilateral alliance. The speech will be followed by lunch at the State Department, hosted by U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and State Secretary Antony Blinken. A briefing by top U.S. military officials on the global situation is also to take place on that day. Before returning to Seoul, he'll stop by Boston to meet academics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology while also hosting a panel session at Harvard University's Kennedy School on Economic Freedom and Liberal Democracy. The Deputy Director of the National Security Office says he expects the summit to ramp up the defense readiness of the two countries while further solidifying the extended deterrence. He added that economic security cooperation will strengthen, especially regarding supply chain issues. And lastly, the summit will set the basis for stronger support of exchanges among future generations from the two countries.
These are a few expected results from the summit, but the most important aspect is the reaffirming that the bilateral alliance's history and the present are based on the shared values of the two countries.
This will be the 6th time President Yoon meets President Biden since taking office last May, and it comes while there are a number of significant issues. Security issues regarding North Korea's increased missile provocations and the prolonged war in Ukraine. Economic issues regarding the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS and Science Act. While different results will come from the two leaders' talks, the most significant, according to an official at the presidential office, will be decided by the people. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Closely watching the upcoming Yoon-Biden summit is the domestic auto industry, as the summit will likely address the issue of U.S. subsidies for electric vehicles, which exclude the models by South Korean automakers. Our trade correspondent Shin Ah-young takes a look at how this key agenda will be addressed in the meeting.
The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act has emerged as one of the key agenda items for the South Korea-U.S. summit. Earlier this week, under the final assembly requirements in North America, the U.S. shortened its list of EV models eligible for tax incentives. South Korean auto giants Hyundai and Kia were both left out. This leaves huge concerns over South Korean companies, as their U.S. counterparts will have a head start in the global EV market. But one expert says this could be seen as an opportunity.
It's a good chance for South Korea, as global automakers now have to compete only based on the quality of their products. We have an advantage over global competitors, as South Korean electric cars have been recognized by the global market, with winning 3 awards this year.
South Korean EV battery makers will also be paying attention to the summit, with concerns that they would have to change their current manufacturing processes. The uncertainty has been substantially relieved as a subsidy of $3,750 is given when more than 40% of the key minerals are either mined or processed in the U.S. or FTA countries, which South Korea is part of. But there are still some uncertainties.
Since we don't have enough resources, we can't extract the major minerals for battery production. The latest requirements imply that even if South Korea processes those minerals, it can still qualify for tax credits. However, uncertainty still lingers as the details of tax incentives for automakers have not been announced yet.
With remaining uncertainties in mind, the government may convey its concern and stance during the summit with President Biden.
It is important to secure a time extension until South Korea can reduce its dependence on Chinese minerals for batteries. It would also be great if the government could convey that there is a contradiction between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Free Trade Agreement, as it could amount to discrimination against a product manufactured outside the U.S.
Meanwhile, more than 100 business leaders will be accompanying President Yoon next week for his trip to the U.S. And Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs hinted at the possibility of addressing the Inflation Reduction Act if the two leaders feel the need for comprehensive cooperation measures. 신하영, Arirang News.
As South Korea continues to see slumping exports, the government is set to ramp up its consultations and support for exporters aimed at removing unnecessary hurdles to the export process. It will also roll out a set of tax benefits to boost investment. Our Lee Soo-jin has more.
The South Korean government is upping its efforts to increase exports. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho announced during an emergency economic meeting on Friday that the ministry's one-stop export support team had solved 320 cases out of the 402 export issues that were filed. The government launched the pan-governmental support team under the Finance Ministry in February to address problems related to exports. Issues related to logistics, customs, and marketing made up around 60% of the cases filed. The country's exports have been on a downward trend from last October.
Although the Korean economy has seen a slowdown in inflation and a moderate recovery in domestic demand, exports and facility investment have remained sluggish due to external uncertainties.
Data from the Korea Customs Service shows that exports are expected to remain sluggish this month as well, dropping 11% on year during the first 20 days of April. This brings the trade deficit this year to more than $26 billion, which is already more than half of last year's record deficit. The one-stop export support team also offers services such as helping logistics companies expand their facilities, as well as speeding up export procedures. The government is planning to expand services available by offering one-on-one counseling services for small and medium-sized companies starting in early May and adding a portal on the One-Stop Export Support website in June to allow companies to file their trade-related issues online. To address falling semiconductor exports, one of the main drivers of the ballooning trade deficit, the government plans to offer tax breaks of up to 28% for SMEs that invest in facilities this year. Semiconductor exports plunged nearly 40% on year during the first 20 days of April. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Wholesale prices in South Korea rose for the third straight month on rising costs of industrial goods and services. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, the producer price index in March increased 0.1% on month, with chemicals and restaurant and lodging services leading the rise. The agricultural and energy sector saw a drop though. On an annual basis, the overall producer prices were up 3.3%. Despite annual inflation remaining high, the annualized rate of price increases has now been slowing for 9 straight months. The PPI is closely watched as a key inflation indicator because of its impact on consumer prices. A counseling center has opened up in the city of Incheon today, aimed at giving guidance to victims of real estate fraud. Run by the Financial Supervisory Service, the center will provide mental health and financial guidance to those who have suffered from fraud cases linked to the nation's unique housing system called 전세, like those who failed to get their large deposits back or face eviction as a result. Those wishing to book a consultation can do so by visiting the center in person, calling the landline, or booking an appointment online. More than 2,400 households in Incheon are victims of large-scale housing scam in the city, which resulted in 3 apparent suicides this week alone. 전세 is a form of renting property by giving a huge lump sum deposit, which is returned after the lease expires. As South Korea celebrates National Science Day today, the country's biggest IT show is underway, showcasing what South Korea has to offer in this promising future sector. Our Kim Jung-sil reports.
This year's World IT Show presented some of the most talked about state-of-the-art technologies like this urban air mobility or UAM that could be used as a flying taxi in the future. The aircraft is being developed by South Korean telecommunication service provider SK Telecom and America's Joby Aviation as part of an exclusive partnership. SK Telecom will be in charge of connecting the aircraft's network. Behind me are visitors trying out the demo ride experience. This UAM aircraft hopes to fly across the Seoul sky by 2025. Many lined up to experience this transportation of the future.
I thought this can help shorten transport times and solve traffic congestion issues. I also thought it would be useful in the future if the technology can be adapted to real life.
In a booth nearby, Samsung's Galaxy S23 mobile phone proudly showcased its eco-friendly technology of using discarded fishing nets to make some of the inner parts of the phone. Hyundai Motor's latest update to its electric vehicle, Kona, on the other hand, focused on making its automobile more like a home. The car can apparently provide electricity to home appliances such as this fridge, monitor, and laptop computer for up to 4 days. But this year's World IT Show wasn't just about big conglomerates. It also gave a platform to startups as well. A 4-year-old startup, Gov't, for example, has already won 3 CES Innovation Awards with its technology to visualize and track warehouse storage.
There are hundreds of thousands of shelves in a warehouse, so it takes a long time to find where anything is. But with our digital twin technology, it's easier and faster for workers to find where things are.
All the companies we spoke to said they hope their technologies can change the lives of people not just in South Korea, but in the world. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Turning over to Sudan, the World Health Organization says that at least 330 people have died and nearly 3,200 have been injured from the fighting in the country since last weekend. The WHO added that all parties should implement a sustained humanitarian pause so that those in need of health care can seek the attention they need. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also called for an immediate ceasefire in the region to allow civilians trapped in conflict zones to escape and seek food, water, and other supplies. Fighting continues between the military and armed opposition forces in the capital Khartoum and other parts of the country.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the United States, SpaceX's Starship, its most powerful ever rocket, exploded in mid-air on its maiden test flight. The 33-engine rocket suffered what SpaceX called a, quote, rapid unscheduled disassembly, about 4 minutes into its flight. Starship had blasted off from a launch pad in South Texas at around 9:30 a.m. local time. About 2.5 minutes into the flight, its heavy rocket booster failed to separate, causing the rocket to spiral out of control. This triggered onboard detonations that destroyed the rocket. Despite its failure to reach orbit, SpaceX engineers called the launch a success. It allowed them to gather large amounts of data to be used in the next launch attempt within a few months. The Starship is SpaceX's next-generation launch system. It's designed to take humans and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, and Mars. Looking to Twitter, where thousands of celebrities and other influential figures, from Beyoncé to the Pope, are losing their verified status. Starting on Thursday, the iconic blue tick has been removed from accounts without a paid subscription. Individuals wanting to keep or gain a blue tick need to pay $8 per month, while organizations need to pay $1,000 for a gold verification mark. The platform has undergone a series of changes since Elon Musk bought the company in October last year. Some changes include restricting voting on Twitter polls to users with a verified account, and only those with paid Twitter accounts will have their tweets featured on the recommended For You page. Lawyers for Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin said on Thursday that criminal charges against him over the fatal shooting of a cinematographer have been dropped. The involuntary manslaughter charges followed the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who was killed after Baldwin fired a live round from a prop gun on the Rust movie set in New Mexico in October 2021. Baldwin has maintained that he was unaware that the gun contained a live round. A film armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, faces the same charges, which her lawyers expect to be dropped soon. The announcement comes less than 2 weeks before the trial was due to start. Filming of the movie resumed on the same day. And finally, thousands of people gathered near the remote west coast Australian town of Exmouth on Thursday local time to catch a rare solar eclipse. It lasted 62 seconds and created a 40-kilometer wide shadow. The eclipse was a rare hybrid type that has not been seen since 2013. Such eclipses create what looks like a ring of fire when the moon moves in front of the sun, which then turns into a total solar eclipse when the sun's light is completely blocked. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Summer-like warmth in the south came to an end. Temperatures all returning to what we would normally have around this time under sunny skies in most parts of the country. So we could have been expecting perfect late spring weather if only yellow dust hadn't blown into the country. Yellow dust is gradually covering the nation. This time, eastern parts of the country are forecast to be covered with very bad levels of yellow dust today and into tomorrow. It's going to be a dusty Saturday in most parts of the country, so if you're planning any outdoor activities, a face mask is a must. East Coast regions are having a relatively cooler afternoon. Highs hovering in the mid to upper teens along with easterly winds. Meanwhile, 전라남도 and Gwangju could see some spotty rain between late this afternoon into this evening. Looking ahead, wide temperature differences between lows and highs to continue, while cooler air moves in next Tuesday with nationwide rain in the forecast. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend.